For centuries, the fall of the Roman Empire has felt like history's biggest mystery novel. It's the ultimate whodunit.
Absolutely. It's a question that fascinates everyone, I think.
We've all heard the usual suspects, right? Political chaos, barbarian invasions, the economy tanking. And our listeners have shared some really great perspectives on those, too.
There are certainly many well-established factors. It's complex.
But what if there's something else? A key piece we've been missing? Maybe something quieter, but incredibly powerful.
That's exactly where things get interesting today. Understanding Rome's decline, it's just fundamental. It tells us so much about how civilizations, well, how they cope or don't cope.
Well, hold on to your hats because we might have a bit of a game changer here. We've been digging into some fascinating new research just published in geology. It's from the University of Southampton.
Ah, yes, I saw that. Very compelling stuff.
And it points a finger at a cause that might have been operating right under everyone's noses, or maybe, more accurately, over everyone's heads, literally darkening the skies.
A chilling thought, definitely. So this deep dive, we're really focusing on this thing called the Late Antique Little Ice Age, or LAA.
LAA, right.
And the argument these scientists are making, a pretty strong one, is that this period of cold played a really significant part in its eventual unraveling.
Exactly. So that's our mission today. We're unpacking the scientific study, looking at the news around it, and trying to see how this climate research might, rewrite a chapter of Roman history.
Or at least add a very crucial layer to it.
Yeah, understanding those links between the environment, which we usually just think of as like the background scenery, and the big dramas of history, civilizations rising, civilizations falling.
It's a critical connection. Okay, so where should we start this? LEA.
Yes, let's dive in. What exactly was this late antique little ice age? What are we talking about here?
Okay, so LAAA stands for Late Antique Little Ice Age. It was a relatively short period, geologically speaking, but it involved some really intense global cooling.
Intense cooling. And when we talk about the fall of Rome, we often think, 476 CE for the West. The article mentions 1453 CE for the East, Constantinople.
Right, those are key dates. But it's important to remember this study is looking at the period leading up to that later date, 1453. It's about a sustained period where temperatures really dropped across the globe.
Okay, a sustained cold snap. But what caused it? I mean, the global climate doesn't just suddenly decide to get colder for decades, does it?
No, exactly. And that's where this new research is really quite exciting. The scientists are proposing that the main driver, the trigger for LAI, was actually a series of massive volcanic eruptions. 3 of them, specifically.
Wow, 3 major eruptions.
Yeah. Their theory is that these volcanoes just pumped enormous amounts of ash and aerosols way up into the atmosphere.
Creating like a sun shield.
Pretty much. Like a veil blocking sunlight, and that caused global temperatures to plummet and stay low for quite a while.
Okay, that sounds genuinely world-altering. But it's a big claim. What's the evidence? They can't have found, like, old Roman weather diaries talking about ash clouds, right?
No, not quite. The evidence is more geological. It's some really clever detective work, actually.
Okay.
The study in geology, it talks about analyzing some very unusual rocks. They found them on what's called a raised beach terrace. It's basically an old shoreline that's now sitting higher up on the west coast of Iceland.
Iceland. And these rocks were unusual for Iceland.
Exactly. That was the first clue. Dr. Christopher Spencer, one of the researchers, he pointed out that these rock types, they just aren't natives to Iceland. They don't belong there geologically.
Huh. So foreign rocks washing up on an Icelandic beach, that definitely raises questions. Where did they come from? How'd they get there?
And that's where the high-tech science comes in. They looked inside these rocks.
Inside them?
Yeah, they analyzed these incredibly tiny mineral crystals called zircons. Think of zircons as like nature's tiny time capsules or fingerprints. Their chemical makeup is unique, depending on where and when they originally formed. So by analyzing these zircons, the researchers could essentially trace the rocks back to their home address.
Wow. So they figured out where the rocks came from.
They did. And their conclusion was that these rocks were most likely carried all the way to Iceland, frozen inside drifting icebergs, during LEA.
Icebergs. Carrying rocks that far south to Iceland.
Precisely. The presence of these non-local rocks delivered by icebergs is really strong physical proof of significant ice rafting. And that points to a much, much colder climate back then, one that allowed icebergs to travel much further than they do today.
So these Icelandic rocks, they're like frozen witnesses testifying to a seriously colder world back then.
You got it.
But okay, colder world, icebergs. How does that connect to the Roman Empire falling apart? It's not like everyone just caught a cold. Surely it's more complicated.
Oh, absolutely more complicated. But the researchers argue this sustained temperature drop would have kicked off a really devastating domino effect across Europe.
Okay, dominoes starting to fall. What's
Yeah.
the first one?
The most immediate, the most widespread impact. Crop failures, big time. Shorter growing seasons, less sunlight filtering through that volcanic haze. Just disastrous for agriculture.
Right, less food being grown. And I guess that hits livestock too.
Exactly. You'd see increased mortality among farm animals, less fodder available, harsher conditions.
Hmm.
It's a double whammy for the food supply. Crops failing, animals dying off.
Which inevitably leads to.
A sharp, painful spike in food prices. Suddenly basic food becomes scarce and incredibly expensive.
And when people can't afford to eat.
Well, the article highlights the grim consequences.
Mm.
Widespread illness, famine spreading across the Roman Empire. A population that's hungry and weakened is just, well, it's far more susceptible to diseases and far less able to cope with any other problems, whether internal politics or external threats.
Now, something the article mentions in its important context is that the Roman Empire had already split, right? Back in 286 AD, you had the Western Empire based around Rome and the Eastern Empire around Constantinople.
That's a crucial distinction, yes.
So how did this big chill, this LALA, affect these two different parts?
Well, as the article clarifies, it's important to remember the Western Roman Empire had, for the most part, already collapsed several decades before this specific climate shift really bit hard.
Okay, so the West was largely gone by the time LALA hit full force.
Correct. But the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire as we often call it, was still very much a major power during this LAI period. And the researchers really stressed that this global temperature drop had a significant impact on that Eastern Empire.
So even though the West had crumbled, this climate event wasn't just some minor historical detail. It still packed a punch for the remaining Roman power in the East.
A significant punch, according to this research. While LEI didn't cause the fall of the West that happened earlier, the central argument here, and this is really the core takeaway, is that this climate shock likely acted as a major stressor, a major contributing factor to the Eastern Empire's own eventual weakening and decline much later on.
So it weakened an already stressed system.
That seems to be the idea. The news article quotes Professor Tom Garnon directly. He put it very well, I thought. He said, "When it comes to the fall of the Roman Empire, this climate shift may have been the straw that broke the camel's back."
The straw that broke the camel's back. That's a powerful image. It suggests the Eastern Empire was juggling a lot of problems already.
Internal issues, external threats, maybe economic strains.
And then suddenly, boom, a massive, prolonged environmental crisis gets thrown into the mix, pushing everything towards a tipping point.
Exactly. It adds weight to this growing understanding in history and archaeology that, environmental factors aren't just passive background. They could be active agents of change.
Right.
And Dr. Spencer's work, analyzing those odd rocks in Iceland, it provides that tangible link. It connects a specific geological finding, these iceberg-rafted rocks, showing a colder climate, to a huge historical outcome, the pressure on the Roman Empire. Remember he said about those rocks? We didn't know where they came from. Now they have a compelling climate-driven explanation.
Okay, so let me try and sum this up. This new research paints a picture where massive volcanic eruptions trigger a sort of little ice age, the LAAA,
Right.
which then caused widespread problems like crop failure and famine, significantly weakening the Eastern Roman Empire and possibly accelerating its long decline.
That's a very good summary of their argument, yes. As I'm not saying climate was the only reason. Nobody's claiming that.
Of course.
But it makes a really strong case that it was a critical piece of the puzzle, a piece we perhaps haven't fully appreciated until now, adding this crucial environmental layer to the whole story of Rome's decline.
It really does make you think differently about history, doesn't it? We get so focused on the emperors, the generals, the big battles.
The human drama, yeah.
But this is a stark reminder that the ground beneath their feet, the air they breathed, the climate they lived in, it wasn't just static scenery. It was an active player, sometimes a very disruptive one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that leads us to a final thought, really, something for you, our listener, to chew on. If this evidence holds up, showing such a strong link between sudden climate change and the fate of Rome, what might that imply for other historical civilizations? How many other societal shifts or collapses might have had a significant environmental component we haven't fully recognized?
That's a big question, looking back through history with that lens.
And maybe even more relevant for us today. What lessons can we take from the Roman experience, seeing how a powerful empire grappled or failed to grapple with abrupt environmental change, especially now in our own era of rapid climate shifts?
Yeah. It forces you to think about that deep, intricate dance between human societies and the natural world, a dance that's been going on throughout all of history and is certainly continuing today.
A very important connection to consider.